Alright, so today... we're not doing that. We're not starting with the YouTube intro. That would be a little odd. I've said that so many times, and it's just a force of habit. It's really just a force of habit. And you get used to saying the outro as well, and have a good night. And that I don't know why. Now that I'm put on the spot, I'm like, I'm recording just myself for the first time maybe in forever. Outside of audio testing, which is strictly just testing audio levels and video compatibility and dumb tech things like that. But yeah. So today, even when I do it like that, it's like today it's the way you say it. You get so used to it, and then when you put out of the context of it and you view it out of the context that you normally do, you're like, yeah, that kind of is a gimmick, I guess. I don't know. Became a little self-aware there for a second. But yeah, today is going to be just chill, I guess, which is a little different. Something just kind of different. I've been thinking about doing stuff like this for about 2 years now. And I never really talk about my photography or related other things and stuff like that outside of like the YouTube channel with the gaming stuff and all that. But I thought I'd change things up today. And the topic I came up with at 4 in the morning was Yamasheta cameras. Also, if you hear any like background stuff like whatever that is, that's my phone going down. If you hear anything like that, that is the cord to the mic being moved because my headset mic is stupid and I just swapped back to my old one, which I like this one more because it sounds better than the newer one I had. The problem with that is that the newer mic had a condenser in it, so it would remove any background noises or interferences or anything. And this mic is very raw and very natural sounding, so any little thing, if I just like, I don't know, type on my keyboard or hit something or yeah, just like move the cord or anything like that, it all picks up. So it is a very raw mic. I like it a lot because it captures my voice accurately. The other one compressed it a bit, and I've talked about this for a YouTube video earlier. I'm not going to talk about all my audio changes again. Anyway, I'm rambling. But yeah. So today I want to, I don't know, talk about Yamasheta cameras. This is a very strange and obtuse thing to choose. But honestly, I've thought about it before in the past, and I was like, these are an early camera that I use in my work. Well, I've used in my work. And they are oddities to a degree. You can find them everywhere if you look for them. There's tons of them out there, but and they're not super special or anything like that. They're cheap. They're all body, just made of plastic. They're borderline disposable quality. They have a little bit more going for them, but that's kind of in the eye of the beholder, I guess. So, yeah, let me preface this with just a little bit of information about these things. So, Yamashita cameras are toy cameras that are rather cheap. As I turn the lens on one of them, that clicking you might hear in the sound, that's me turning one of the f-stops on it. Yamashita cameras are cheap toy cameras that were mainly sold and marketed in malls and on mass consumer channels and stuff like QVC and if that they were giveaway things. They were things that like your boss would give you in like some cheapo pack for work if you worked at like a managerial or corporate level. 'Cause that's how that stuff works. Like you go to like an executive meeting, they give you pens, you meet other executives, they give you your business card, they give you little toys, they give you like these days they'd give you like little cheapo Bluetooth speakers or flashlights or things like that. This is the same kind of thing. You'd get like back in the day, you'd get like disposable cameras or other things. These ones were fancier because they were reusable, but they're still in that same kind of vein of camera in terms of quality. Nowadays, you do get disposable cameras where you can rewind and take out the film all the time. It's not really an expectation, but it's a very normalized thing for disposable cameras for them to be reusable these days. And these ones predate that. These are from the ones that I use are from the early 80s into the early 90s, to my knowledge. I say to my knowledge because the one that goes into the early 90s is a big question mark. And we'll get to that later because I don't think I'll ever have answers for it. As bizarre as that sounds, I really don't think I will ever get some hard facts about what this thing is. It's not a super special camera, but anyway, I ramble about that. So, Yamasheta itself, there's two Yamashetas, and one is real and one is fake. The real Yamasheta uses an I in the Sheta of its name, and it's from Japan. Yamasheta originally was a camera distributor during the 1920s and through to the 1950s. I think they tapered off and just dissolved or vanished. That happened a lot in the 20th century without a lot of record keeping or historical upkeep. Is that you'll tend to read about like, oh, Bolsey. Bolsey was an American camera company that sold some weird and interesting things. They did not exist for very long, and they kind of just vanished. Like, the creator went on to do other things. I don't know if he made the Rolleiflex cameras, I think he made something like that. He might have made the Rolleiflex cameras during the 20th century, but there are weird random companies you'll read about like Bolsey or other such ones that exist, and they exist for a long period of time or such, or even a short period of time, and then they'll just drop off the face of the earth and vanish into history. And all we have is kind of what the things that they made or developed left over if they still exist. And Yamashita kind of has a little bit of that fate at the end of it. Their origins are a bit fuzzy with them starting up in the 20s, and then it's kind of fuzzy at the end as well, where they kind of phased out and just disappeared at the end of the 50s. But they made a few cameras. They mainly marketed and distributed Shinko cameras, like the Shinko Seikei camera brand in Japan. I don't know if Shinko Seikei had any other distributors. They might have, but they were pretty alright cameras. I am aware that Yamashita also distributed a lot of stereo cameras, so stereoscope cameras, where you take your film and you put it in your camera, but the camera has two lenses on the front, and you fire it and it takes two snapshots at the same time, just ever so slightly different in perspective, to create two slides that you would then put together. Well, you would put them opposite of each other on like a board or something. You'd have them enlarged or something like that, depending on what method you want to go about it. Because stereoscopes were not very popular towards the mid 20th century. That's much more of an early 20th century thing. But they were distributing and making, to my knowledge, cameras that could still do that. For some reason, I don't know exactly why. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, what kind of market would there have been at that time? You're talking about people who would have been like interested in, well, first of all, the World War II would have been going on for the most part. And yeah, I'm just trying to think like what kind of market would they have had for that? I'm not sure. It's a very odd idea to me now that I think of it. I'm just like stereo cameras in the mid 20th century. That's odd. Like you can still get stereo cameras today, but now there's like a market for that. At the time, I don't know why that would have been pursued. Anyway, I'm getting stuck on that in my brain. Now my brain's hooked its claws into it. I'm just like, find out why this thing existed. But I'll get off that. But yeah, so they were a camera distributor. They vanished, and around 20 years later, a strange thing started to just kind of happen, it seems, where various Hong Kong-based independent mass-produced camera manufacturers, just random there's a lot of factories in Hong Kong that manufacture various camera equipment. The weird part is that China itself properly does not, like the PRC, does not have a very strong, it has an extremely negative actual history with photography and cameras and such. I might talk about that in a different episode or part of this if it continues. But yeah, cameras were very much a highly restricted and upper class item during that period of time. So Hong Kong in the 70s had an amount of factories making equipment and such, most of it being shipped overseas. And that's where these things come into play. These Yamashita weird toy cameras. As I said earlier, they were mostly sold kind of as promo items to people, gifts, cheap oddities at like festivals or carnivals or baby arcades back then or some such as like prizes. And it's not the same Yamashita. That's the thing. There's the two Yamashitas. There's the real one and the fake one. This fake one replaces the I in the Shita with an E. And it looks, I'm used to it, but it honestly looks weird. And I think it uses the font for Mitsubishi or something. It's either using the font for Mitsubishi or Masushita, and I'm not sure which one it is, but it has the same typeface, almost. If not, it's very similar. So it looks kind of official, but also not. It has that slight bootleg-esque look to it, and that caught my eye when I originally found these. I'm like, these are strange toy cameras that seem a little sketchy. What do they do? And what they do is take very blurry images. They take... I'll give credit to the one that we'll talk about later, but the first two I want to talk about, they're not the greatest. I like what they do for what they do, and what they do is what I want them to do. That is a word sandwich. But I'll start with the Yamashita Cam 2. There's a ton of these. I'm only going to talk about the ones I have. I have 3 of them. I'm only going to talk about the ones that I have specifically. And I'll be throwing up images regarding things about them in regards to the context of what I'm talking about in post. So that's what you're looking at there on the screen. It's just like, what are these things? So Yamashita, well, I started that off dumb. So, like, I was going to restart all that over again. It's like, oh, no, you got to put the record, you got to reset the needle on the record again. So, yeah, the Yamashita Cam 2 is the one I use the most, weirdly enough. It is compactly designed. It's very boxy. I like how it looks, and it functions very well, which is the weirdest part, because these are very cheap and they're very flimsy, and that will very much be the topic of the next camera. But the Yamashita Cam 2 is pretty sturdy. I think I've dropped this before on a like hard floor, and it's still totally fine. If you hear noises and such, that's me messing with it, sorry. But yeah, it's pretty well designed for being a small. That's the other thing. These things are kind of, they fit like in, I'm holding in the palm of my hand, and my hand is like massive compared to it, but it's like the size of an iPod, not an iPhone, like an original iPod. It's like the size of that, but with a lens on it, and it's fat. And instead of f-stops, it's got like weather. It has like weather symbols on it. So I know what they all represent, but they have weather symbols. So like rainy is for some reason F6.3, and then cloudy is F8, partially cloudy is F11, and then sunny for some reason is F16. And I generally just keep it on F16 for this thing, just because. And it always works. It's just, I don't know why they went with that. Why was it, did they want to, I get that they must have wanted to simplify what an f-stop is, but the symbology doesn't seem to line up with the actual f-stops, in my opinion. Because weather conditions don't really, it doesn't really connect to f-stops. F-stops are about focal distance and how the image is perceived based on the amount of light it's receiving. So I get that with some of it, like the sunny day one, you're going to need a lot of sun for an F16 in theory. Not all the time, but most of the time. But yeah, the lenses on these are always funny. I've also taken one off of the next camera, the Cam 3, and they are identified as Cam 1, 2, and 3. I've never seen a Cam 1. I don't know if they exist, and the rabbit holes that I've tried to dig myself to try and find out, like, hey, is there anything about this? Do these exist? And the ones that I've gone down that other people have virtually, nobody looks into these things. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about this first. Nobody gives a shit about these cameras. You will not find any, like, fan forums or documentation about these things anywhere. These things are just weird oddities that just are out there. And nobody seems to be paying attention to them. And I seem to be one of the few who does. But before, oh man, I'm losing track of what I was talking about now because I went off on a tangent. Yeah, I've never seen an F1, well, F1, Cam 1. I've never seen a Cam 1. I don't know if they exist. If it does, I would assume it would be either a prototype or something very, very basic looking. Because these ones, they're specifically named the hashtag SPCam3 and the hashtag SPCam2. That is what these first two original Yamashitas, for some reason, are designated as. So I just call it the Cam 2 and the Cam 3. And I have the box. The boxes for these things are very, I don't want to say industrial, but purpose-built, I guess. They're very basic. They're kind of ugly in a weird way. They also smell kind of bad. That's a weird thing to say, but they smell like an old Foot Locker, which to me tells me quite well what kind of conditions these cameras have either come from or have been sitting around in. And they do come with like manuals and instructions. They all come with the same thing, and I've seen these instructions packed in with multiple different cheapo and sometimes disposable cameras, just with the branding, like the name brand changed, and everything else is always the same. So I don't find them quite impressive. Sometimes with these Yamashita ones, though, they come with a rebate thing, like, oh, you can if you redeem this, you can get a special offer on a flash unit for this. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, I'm going to mail this to the P.O. box in Texas this is designated to and get a get a coupon on a flash unit for a toy camera. uh, yeah, these things, they're from Hong Kong. They they're just so, I don't know, they're just on. I don't know exactly what to say about them. I have more to talk about with the other two than this first one. The Cam 2 is my favorite just because it's the funnest to use in its form factor. It feels great to use. The shutter on it is solid. It's like it's got a proper metal shutter. The wind is good. It's just a small compact camera that's nice to use if you want to use something that's cheap and flimsy. And I'll post a few of the images here now of what the camera itself has done and what it can do. I like it. One of the reasons why I was kind of drawn to this is at the time I was very, very invested in Polaroid photography, and that was partially due to a mix of just personal interest in the way the images were made and the actual end result of that, which to me was very inspiring, I guess is a word for it. I really grew attached to the dreamlike blurriness of Polaroids at this point in time a few years ago. And these toy cameras, specifically the 2 and 3, do a very similar, but not exact, but very similar kind of blurring effect that Polaroids do, but on 35 millimeter, which was it was a very good analog for me to have that in a more mass developmental way. Because you take a Polaroid, a pack of Polaroids is normally, at this current time, it's around $17 to $20 depending. And you get 8 photos. And out of those packs, on average, for me, about 6 to 7 of those images actually work out. So you're paying $20 for, let's say, around 6 images. That's quite expensive. And you have to make every shot count. And Polaroids are a lot harder to use than 35 millimeter in any camera. Polaroids are very temperamental to get a good image from. So you need to know how to use them. Honestly, I know a lot of people use like Fuji Instax and Polaroids as kind of gimmicky event, throwaway, fun kind of film. And that's totally fine. You can use it like that. I personally don't use them that way. But through just lots of weird experimentation with various cameras and doing things that a lot of cameras are not designed to do, I have kind of learned over the years just how finicky Polaroids can be. So when I found these, and tried them out, I didn't know what they would do at first. I was more drawn to their body design and just the obtuseness of what they were. And once I started taking images with them, I realized, wait, this looks just like a Polaroid, but it's not. And it kind of weirded me out, but I went along with it. And I haven't used them that much this year. I think I used the Yamasheta 2 once this year. The Yamasheta 3 I haven't used in about a year and a half. I use the third Yamasheta every so often. That's a camera, every so often you get a camera that you put a roll of film in, and then that roll of film stays in it for a few months, and you constantly are telling yourself, I need to finish that roll so I can get it out and process it. Because you don't like having it stuck in there. It's just what I don't know if it's a little OCD thing on my part, but it's one of those things that is always at the back of your mind. It's that happens so much with my Nikon uh, NTLZ 80. It's a little hand like in what's it called? Oh, I'm drawing a blank on it. It's your standard Nikon like pocket camera that you'd get in the late 90s. That's what it is. Point and shoot, point and shoot. That's what it is. I was drawing a blank on that for some reason. It's your standard point and shoot, and I use that camera for the Glass Sky project. Actually, that's the main primary camera that I use for that whole project. I don't use anything else for it, and I oftentimes end up putting a film in there and just leaving it in there for like I don't know, upwards of a half a year sometimes. And I forget about it sometimes, and I look in the. It has a little see-through door. I see it, and I'm just like, oh, I need to finish that one, don't I? And I don't know what's on it anymore. I don't know what's on the roll anymore because it's been so long. So I'll go and process it, and I'll be like, okay, this is some Glass Sky stuff. There's my cat. There's some more Glass Sky stuff. There's a random trip to a nature preserve or something for like 3 shots. There's a single shot from the beach or something, and then more Glass Sky stuff. So I have a weirdness with that aspect of point and shoot cameras specifically. It does happen with my SLRs and my more professional things as well. I'm gonna try to cut back down on the energy, but yeah, that's a bad habit that is not really that much of an issue, but it's more just a weird quirk that the third Yamashita tends to have with me as well, in the same vein as my one of my Nikon cameras. And if I'm jumping all over the place in my talking about this stuff, I'm sorry. I tend to, when I put on the spot like this about talking about things, I tend to do it a lot with the YouTube, with the gaming stuff. And yeah, my brain is very strain of consciousness. It's very like in the moment of what it is, and I might go off on tangents and such. So sorry and bear with me with that. I try to come back around to the point. But yeah, the Cam 2 is all right. I see them occasionally online for sale. These cameras don't tend to cost too much of anything, maybe like $20. But yeah, the Cam 2 if you're looking for a Yamashita camera, the Cam 2 is solid. There are variant forms of a lot of these cameras, which was confusing to me at first upon researching and keeping track of these, because I try to keep track of these to see if any more oddball things just pop out of the weeds somewhere over the months. And I've been doing this for years. It's like a side hobby almost. Just like once a month I'll check on like, oh, what are all the listings for the Yamashita cameras and see if there's anything weird that just somehow comes out out of the woodworks of the wild. And that's where the third one came from. But yeah, the Cam 2 is relatively common. It looks like the image that I've shown before here on it, and I'll probably show it again. But the Cam 3 was the first one of them that I got. And the images are exactly the same as the Cam 2. It's just an entirely different form factor and body. And this one is from the late 80s into the early 90s. To my knowledge, the Cam 2 is from the early 80s. I don't know if I said that before, but the Cam 3 is from the late 80s into the early 90s. And this one, over the course of the past couple years, has become a lot more uncommon. I don't want to say it's rare because it's not, but I don't see this that much compared to the other one. And the form factor and body, I don't know why, but I found it very like attractive in a weird way in how it visually looks as a product. It seemed very minimalist, but utilitarian. It has the exact same lens that's on the Cam 2, except it's slightly in a different casing. It's kind of elongated out a little bit, with like a fake kind of bevel to it. And my camera itself, funny enough, I've gone through 2 of these Cam 3s, and I made it a point to repair my first one that I have with the remains of a second one that was already broken. The second one that I bought was broken and was listed as broken, and I knew that. I bought it specifically to replace the back door for the camera, which even then would end up having to get taped. So I'll show a picture so you can see. There's a giant wad of packing tape on the side of the camera, and that's to keep it closed while I use it. Because these things are just so flimsy. The Cam 2 is pretty solid. The Cam 3, oh my god, is this thing a cheap piece of shit? So I've had to perform surgery on this thing like twice just to get it working again. And this is also through cannibalizing another one to keep this one alive somehow. So I dropped this on the floor once, and that destroyed the back door latch, like the back part on the right that would keep it attached to the camera. A part of the plastic for that snapped off, and it just totally destroyed that door. So after that, I got the new door after cannibalizing parts from a second one, and realized that the locking mechanism, which is on the left side of the back of the camera that keeps it closed, must have broken as well during that whole sequence. So that's what the tape is there for. But lo and behold of that, after that, I dropped it again, and this time the door lived for what it was, but it destroyed the rewind winder on the left, on the top left, where you would put in the film. You put the film cartridge into the camera. You snap it down to keep it in place, and it's there, and it kind of moves along while you are taking your photos. And then when you're done with your photos, you gotta push the switch that's on. There's a switch right next to the viewfinder. You push that in, and that releases the tension that is keeping the film at the other end there. And then you rewind it back using the little lever on the back. And that whole mechanism, the rewind winder, shattered. And the problem with this is, well, the problem with this design, which is, it has the exact same design for the Cam 2 and the one that we'll talk about later. But the difference is that the Cam 2 uses a metal handle on the top that is bolted with a screw into the plastic spinner for it to spin around so you can rewind it. The Cam 3 is entirely plastic except for the metal bolt that goes into the camera where it kind of twirls around and lets you rewind it. So it has it's an entirely plastic mechanism pretty much. And it's really cheap and flimsy. So I had to learn how to basically build one of these things. So I had to disassemble this whole mechanism and use the mechanism that was in the broken one in here to also restore this mechanism so that this camera can function again. And I'm sorry if that was, once again, a lot of words. But yeah. The Cam 3 it's a mess. It's a very annoying mess. I like how it looks a lot. It functions identically to the Cam 2, and that's the reason why I kind of still just have it and don't use it that much of all. Because I have one that works the exact same, and it's not gonna break its legs trying to walk downstairs or anything like that. But Yeah. Also, these things are cheaply made of some pretty iffy plastic. Like, it doesn't feel bad to use. They feel very fine. But you would notice, and I realized this while taking apart the Cam 3, you're just like, they kind of have a bit of weight to themselves to keep themselves balanced as cameras, as I let them slap themselves against my desk. And there is a chunk of I don't want to say raw iron, but there's a chunk of very rusty, at least in the Cam 3 that I opened before and the Cam 3 I have now. I haven't opened the Cam 2, but I assume it's a similar situation. There's just this really rusty slab of iron inside the base to keep it so it doesn't feel like it's made of, I don't know, the material you'd get from a McDonald's toy or something. So, I think I've rambled enough about those two. I want to talk a little bit about the third one. And the third one is the Yamasheta auto winding. This is to my knowledge, out of all the cameras that I own and ones that I've seen, this is one of the rarest cameras that I have seen that I've not seen, because I am the only one who I've ever seen have it, and I've never seen anyone talk about this thing. It's a point and shoot from the early to mid 90s, and it's nothing too special for what it does. It is a pretty solid point and shoot camera. It's a little odd in how it's a little jank on the grip on the front. You don't really hold it the way it looks like you're supposed to hold it. And it's quite big. It's actually about the size, let me line it up. It's about the size of a proper iPhone or something, but it's really fat. So, like, it's got more heft to it than my Nikon point and shoot. This thing's kind of bulky. And I assume that's because it probably has a slab of iron in the bottom of it as well. I almost had a purple burglar alarm there, like as if I was Scottish. Ooh. But yeah, the Yamasheta auto winding is a average-ish point-and-shoot camera. I see sometimes cameras that look kind of similar to this, but they're never made by the same company. I own the only one I've ever seen, and it's very strange to me just in that, because these are very mass-produced cameras, and this is very clearly made by the same factory, or at least group of whoever owned the branding for this thing and like the manufacturing process. Because there are some design language aspects of this that do remind me of the Cam 3, but it's not, it's much more contemporary of the time it came out. And another oddball thing about this, to me, is the fact that it says it was made in Japan on the front casing for the lens, which is very odd because the other ones were made in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So, for this to be made in Japan, that makes me question, okay, was it? Or did they somehow get a manufacturer in Japan to make this for them or for someone? I'm not sure. It's one of those big question marks that I probably will never get any answers for, and only I care about. But I turn it on and it screams at me. But yeah, this is just a weird oddball camera for me. The images it takes, and I'll show a few of them now, are pretty alright. I like the color saturation that it can do. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. It doesn't have any inputs for like a flash or anything. It takes 2 AA's, I believe. Yeah, it takes 2 AA's. Now I feel like I just killed it because like, did I fry it? Did I finally kill it? Nope, it's alive again. It was just acting dumb. Yeah, it's a little temperamental, not too much. And it has this big past sticker on the top of it. Yeah, I don't know. This is an oddity to me in just that I don't have any answers for it existing. It just does exist. It's fine. As a camera, it functions pretty averagely. But it's just got this weird menacing mystique about it. So, both in just where was it made, who made it, why does it say it can do ISO 400 to 100 when I believe it registers only to ISO 200? It doesn't have any ability to sense that, to my knowledge, from what I've looked at inside of it. And yeah, I don't know. I do believe that the weird bulb that's above the lens is some sort of electronic eye to sense the exposure. But the thing is you can't choose what kind of exposure for the camera to pull off. That's why I'm just like, I'm pretty sure it just registers to 200 because you can't tell it what ISO the film you're putting into it is. So I don't think it's smart enough to know how to calculate that based upon what material is inside of itself. I don't think it is. If it is, it's kind of scary. But yeah. Anyway, the Yamasheta cameras are just some weird things that nobody cares about. I have a mild curiosity. That's the thing, is if this has come off as like, oh, he's obsessed with these toy cameras. Not at all. These things are just tools that I use to play around with to make weird pictures with. But there's just like this weird backlog of why do these exist? And the answer at the end of the day ultimately is a mixture of cheap cash grabs, and I don't know. Still, after years of this, I still just don't know, man. They just do, and they do their job. But yeah. So, that's Yamasheta. I don't know why I chose this to be like the first topic for whatever this is. I hope it was informative in some kind of roundabout way. I'm not the greatest at explaining things. I've told people this plenty in the past. I am absolutely not a great person at explaining like intricate details about things. I can ramble about things, and if you can extrapolate things from that, then that's good. I don't know. In any case, this was fun, and maybe I'll do more soon. I did like unironically, I did like 5 takes of this before this take, which actually ended up with me talking, because putting me in front of a mic without me like having something visual to interact and play off of and such. That's why I put the cameras honestly in front of me. I put the cameras here in front of me to kind of keep my mind on pace, and for me to just know in the moment that everything is fine and I have the things that I want to talk about and such in front of me. It's weird. I know it's just me, but yeah, I did like 5 separate takes before this where I just put the headset on, turned on the recording, and I just sat there and blanked mega hard. It was a mixture of uncertainty, fear, and it really is just stage fright, I guess. And that's something that I don't really feel on a normal basis. So it was very weird for me. It was very uncomfortable to do that and this in a weird way. Because, yeah, you could, I don't know, you throw me up on a stage in front of people. As long as I have like a direction, if somebody tells me what to do or I'm given free rein to do what I want, then I know exactly what's going on. You throw me here and just expect me to start talking, which is what I did to myself. I don't know how to operate with that. So that was kind of awkward for me. It was just like, I will do another take. And I just blank, sit there for 5 minutes in silence, not saying anything, just zoning out. Just, okay, we'll try again. We'll do this again. So anyway, yeah. Now my mind is getting scatterbrained. Thank you for listening. And until next time, going back to we're looping all the way back to the start with the self-awareness of the YouTube stuff. Thank you, and see you next time. Have a good night.